My uncle let his lover die so his wife wouldn't discover the affair. But he's haunted by it. Every night, I don't know if this is the right place for this, but I feel like I'm going to explode if I don't tell someone. I need an outside perspective because living in this house right now feels like being trapped in a bottle with the air slowly running out. I live with my Aunt Pilar and Uncle Felix in a quiet duplex in Cordoba, the kind of place where the loudest sound is usually the hum of the refrigerator. The walls are paper thin. You can hear everything. I can hear my aunt stirring sugar into her morning coffee, the soft click of her knitting needles in the evening, the rustle of my uncle turning a page in his newspaper. For most of my life, that was the soundtrack to this home. Quiet, orderly, and meticulously controlled. My Aunt Pilar is a woman who values dignity above all else. I'm not exaggerating when I say her entire world is built on the principle of keeping up appearances. Her house is spotless, her linens smell of lavender and starch, and she believes that any unpleasantness, any dirt, should be dealt with quietly and kept far away from the living room. Her dignity is a fortress, and she's the queen inside its walls. My Uncle Felix has always been the perfect king for her quiet kingdom. He was the man in the crisp shirt, the one with the polished shoes and the calm, steady voice. Their life together from the outside was a perfectly composed photograph. No drama, no raised voices, no cracks in the facade. But for the past few months, that photograph has been ripped to shreds. Our home isn't quiet anymore. Every single night at exactly 3:07 a.m., I'm jolted awake by my uncle's screaming. And I don't mean the muffled yelp of a bad dream. This is a raw, guttural sound that claws its way through the walls and into my bones. It's a sound of pure terror. But what's worse is the pleading. It's not just noise. There are words tangled in it, choked and desperate. He's begging someone. It sounds like he's talking to a person right there in the room with him, pleading with them for something. The first time it happened, I bolted out of bed, my heart hammering against my ribs, and ran to their door. I was about to knock when it opened, and Pilar stood there, fully dressed in her silk robe, her face a pale, tight mask. Before I could even ask, she said, "A nightmare, Adela. Go back to sleep." Then she closed the door in my face, and I just stood there in the dark hallway listening to the muffled sobs from inside. This is our new, terrifying normal now. The silence of the day is heavy and suffocating, thick with everything we're not saying. Then the night comes, and the clock ticks towards 3:07 a.m. like a bomb. The scream shatters the peace, and then the silence that follows is even worse. It's a haunted, broken silence that hangs in the air until dawn. I haven't had a full night of sleep in months, and I feel like I'm losing my mind. Something is deeply, horribly wrong in this house, and I'm the only one who seems willing to admit that the ghost we're living with isn't in the walls, but in my uncle's head. The thing is, the screaming didn't start in a vacuum. Looking back now, the signs were all there, like little hairline fractures spreading through the foundation of our lives before the whole thing came crashing down. Before the 3:07 a.m. ritual began, things were already wrong, just in a quieter, more insidious way. It started with his phone. Tio Felix, a man who used to leave his phone on the kitchen counter for hours without a thought, suddenly started guarding it like it was the crown jewels. It was always screened down on the table, or clutched in his hand, or buried deep in his pocket. He'd take it with him to the bathroom. He'd jump if it buzzed. I remember one evening, we were all watching some boring historical drama, and I saw his screen light up from the corner of my eye. He angled his body away from me and Tia Pilar so fast he nearly knocked over his glass of wine. His thumbs moved in a frantic blur for a few seconds, then he shoved it back in his pocket, his face pale. He had this sheen of sweat on his brow, even though the AC was on. It was like watching a cornered animal. I tried to bring it up with my aunt, of course. I did it gently. We were in the kitchen one morning, the smell of toast and coffee in the air, and I just said, "Tia, have you noticed Tio Felix seems stressed lately? He's so jumpy." Pilar didn't even look up from slicing a tomato. Her knife moved with the same steady, precise rhythm as always. "Your uncle is a man with responsibilities, Adela. Men worry." That was it. End of discussion. Another time, I was more direct. "He's hiding his phone. He's acting weird." This time she did look at me, and her eyes were like chips of ice. She put her knife down with a soft click and wiped her hands on her apron. "Don't bring dirt into my living room," she said, her voice dangerously quiet. That was her mantra, her shield. Any hint of unpleasantness was dirt, and her home was a sacred, clean space. Her dignity was that fortress, and she was terrified of what lay outside its walls. It was easier for her to pretend the cracks weren't there than to admit the fortress might be crumbling. So I let it go. What else could I do? My own theory was the obvious, boring cliché. I figured he was having an affair. I felt this hot surge of anger for my aunt, this protective rage that she was being so willfully blind. But underneath it, there was this grim, resigned feeling. You read about it all the time on subs like Our Relationships, right? The secretive phone, the sudden changes in behavior, classic cheating husband trope. I'd watch him, with his shifty eyes and his clammy hands, and I'd feel a mix of disgust and, I'm ashamed to say, pity. Just another sad middle-aged man blowing up his life for some cheap thrill. I had no idea the truth was so much darker, so much more horrifying. I was angry about a garden-variety betrayal, completely oblivious to the fact that we were living on top of a goddamn graveyard. The final straw came on a Tuesday afternoon. The air in the house was thick and heavy, the kind of oppressive stillness that comes before a summer thunderstorm. I was in the laundry room, a tiny, windowless closet off the kitchen, folding towels. It was my one moment of mindless peace. The rhythmic thud of the dryer, the clean, warm smell of fabric softener, the repetitive motion of folding. It was a small anchor in the chaos. I was folding a big, fluffy bath towel, smoothing out the corners with my palms, when a shadow fell over me. I looked up, and my Uncle Felix was standing in the doorway, blocking the light. He looked like he hadn't slept in a year. His eyes were bloodshot and sunken into his skull, and the skin on his face was gray and waxy. His usually crisp shirt was wrinkled, with a dark sweat stain spreading from the collar. He just stood there, staring at me with this hollow, desperate expression. My first thought was, here we go. He's finally going to confess. I braced myself for the sordid, tearful details of his affair. He took a step into the laundry room, closing the door softly behind him. The small space immediately felt suffocating. He smelled of stale coffee and fear. He wasn't looking at me, but at his own hands, which were twisting and untwisting in front of him. Adela, he whispered. His voice was a dry rasp, like sandpaper on wood. You're good with computers, right? With technology. I just nodded, my hands frozen on the half-folded towel. My heart started to beat a little faster. This wasn't the opening to a confession I had expected. This felt different, colder. He finally met my eyes, and what I saw there made the air leave my lungs. It wasn't guilt. It was pure, animal terror. He leaned in closer, and his voice dropped even lower, becoming a conspiratorial hiss. I need your help. I need you to delete something for me, from my phone. He fumbled in his pocket and pulled it out, holding it like it was a venomous snake. Old messages, and other things. I need them gone, completely, so no one can ever find them. I stared at him. The dryer clicked off, plunging the room into an eerie silence. It was just the sound of our breathing. My mind was racing, trying to make sense of the panic radiating off him. This was more than just hiding texts from some other woman. You don't look like you've seen a ghost because you're afraid your wife will find out you're sleeping with her secretary. I can't figure it out, he rambled, his thumb swiping frantically at the screen. These new phones, everything is in the cloud, they say. I need it gone from the cloud, gone from everywhere. He looked up at me again, his eyes pleading. Can you do that? Can you make it all just disappear? And that's when it hit me. The way he said disappear. The look on his face. The nightly screams at 3:07 a.m. pleading with someone who wasn't there. My blood ran cold. This wasn't about erasing an affair. This was about erasing a person. He wasn't trying to hide his tracks from my aunt. He was trying to scrub a ghost from his digital history, to make every trace of a dead woman vanish as if she'd never existed. And he wanted me, his niece, to be his accomplice. In that tiny, suffocating laundry room, something inside me snapped. The fear and pity I'd felt for him evaporated, replaced by a cold, sharp fury that was terrifyingly clear. All the noise in my head, the confusion, the anxiety, the sleepless nights, it all just went silent. I looked at this pathetic, sweating man, my uncle, and I didn't see family. I saw a monster trying to hand me a shovel to help him bury a body. I didn't scream. I didn't cry or accuse him. That's what he was expecting. He was braced for a hysterical niece, for a dramatic scene. Instead, I just gave a small, slow nod. My face felt like a mask, and I heard a voice that sounded like mine, but was calm and steady, say, "Okay, Tio, I'll help you." The relief that washed over his face was disgusting. It was the face of a coward who had just found an accomplice. He practically shoved the phone into my hands, the plastic warm and slick with his sweat. "Thank you, Adela," he stammered. "Thank you. Just make it all go away." "I'll need my laptop," I said, my voice still unnervingly even. "It will be faster. I'll take it to my room." He just nodded eagerly, like a dog. Yes, of course. Whatever you need." I walked out of the laundry room, his phone clutched in my hand. It felt impossibly heavy, like it contained the weight of a human soul. Every step I took down the hall to my room was deliberate. My plan was already forming, sharp and brutal in its simplicity. I wasn't going to delete a single thing. I was going to find everything. My revenge wouldn't be loud or messy. It would be quiet, methodical, and absolute. It would be the truth. I closed my bedroom door and clicked the lock. The sound was so final. I sat at my desk, my hands shaking slightly now that I was alone. I plugged his phone into my laptop and the screen lit up with his background photo, a smiling picture of him and my aunt on their anniversary. The hypocrisy of it made me want to vomit. I started the backup process, a full clone of his entire digital life onto a new external hard drive I kept for my coursework. The progress bar on the screen crawled from 0% to 1%. It was going to take a while. As the data transferred, I started digging. I didn't need to dig deep. It was all right there. A thread of messages with a woman named Sophia. The early ones were flirtatious, standard affair stuff. But then the tone shifted. Her messages became more desperate, talking about promises he'd made. His replies were cold, dismissive. Then came the final string of texts from a few months ago, the night the screaming started. Her texts were frantic, full of typos. She was scared. She wrote that she felt dizzy, that her chest hurt. "Felix, please answer me, I don't feel right." Then, a few minutes later, "Something is wrong. Call someone." His last message to her, sent at 2:54 a.m., was just one word. "Stop." After that, there was only silence from her. My heart was pounding in my ears. I clicked over to his call log. My eyes scanned the timestamps for that night. 3:07 a.m., a blocked number, 3:18 a.m., blocked again, 3:31 a.m., another one. She had been trying to call him. He was awake, ignoring her. And right there, in the gaping hole where a call to 112, our emergency number should have been, there was nothing. Absolutely nothing. He had just let the phone ring while a woman lay dying on the other end of the line. The backup finished. I saved a copy of everything. Every message, every photo, every damning timestamp. As a final step, my hands moving on autopilot, I typed Sophia's full name into Facebook. Her profile popped up immediately. There she was, smiling, on a beach somewhere, squinting in the sun. She looked happy. She looked alive. And listed in her family members was her sister. I clicked on her profile. She lived here. In Cordoba, just a few blocks away. I stared at the sister's profile picture, then back at the evidence saved on my hard drive. I had it all. The weapon was loaded. He had asked me to make a ghost disappear. Instead, I was about to give her a voice loud enough to bring down the whole goddamn house. I spent the next day in a state of icy calm. I invited my aunt's guest first. I sent a carefully worded message to Sophia's sister on Facebook, introducing myself as a neighbor. I told her I was so sorry for her loss, that Sophia had always been so kind in the hallway, and that I wanted to offer my condolences in person. She replied almost immediately, grateful and a little lost. We set a time for tea the following afternoon. Then I went to my aunt. She was polishing silver in the dining room, a task she reserved for when she was trying to impose order on a world she felt was spinning out of her control. "Tia," I said, my voice sweet and light. "I met a lovely woman, Elena. She just moved back to Cordoba after some family trouble. I thought it would be nice to have her for tea tomorrow to make her feel welcome. Pilar looked up, her expression softening. A good deed, a social obligation, this was the language she understood. Of course, Adela. That's very thoughtful of you. We'll use the good china. The next afternoon, as I was setting the table, it happened. I was taking the good teapot from the glass cabinet when my eyes landed on a silver-framed photo tucked in the back, one I hadn't looked at in years. It was a picture of two teenage girls, arms slung around each other, laughing into the camera. One was a young Tia Pilar. The other was Sophia. I felt the air punch out of my lungs. My blood turned to ice water in my veins. It wasn't just some random woman. It was her, Sophia, her childhood friend. The one she'd been talking about for weeks. The one who'd recently divorced and moved back home. The friend Pilar had been bringing homemade soup to, worrying over, trying to help get back on her feet. My uncle wasn't just cheating on his wife. He was cheating on her with her struggling best friend, a woman she was actively trying to save. The betrayal was so much deeper and more monstrous than I could have ever imagined. When the doorbell rang, my heart didn't even flutter. I was hollowed out, a machine set to perform a single terrible task. I let Elena, Sophia's sister, in first. She was a quiet woman with her sister's eyes and a sadness that seemed to cling to her like a shawl. Then Pilar came out from the kitchen, all smiles and perfect hostess charm, completely oblivious. The three of us sat in the living room, the one my aunt fought so hard to keep clean of dirt. The small talk was agonizing. The weather, the price of oranges. Pilar poured the tea, her movements graceful and practiced. The steam rose in fragrant curls from the delicate china cups. For a few minutes, we were a perfect picture of civility. Then, when there was a lull in the conversation, I reached for the stack of papers I had placed on the side table. They were still warm from the printer. I didn't say a word. I just stood up, leaned over the polished wood of the coffee table, and placed the stack squarely between them. The soft thud of the paper landing seemed to echo in the silent room. Elena frowned, confused. Pilar looked at me, a flicker of annoyance in her eyes. Adela, what is this? Elena picked up the top page. I watched her eyes scan the first few messages, her brow furrowed. Then her expression slackened in horror. A choked, strangled sound escaped her throat. Her hand started to shake so violently that the paper rattled. She dropped the pages back on the table as if they had burned her. Pilar's gaze hardened. She saw Elena's reaction and her spine straightened, her fortress walls going up, ready to defend her husband, her home, her dignity. She wouldn't look at the messages. She wouldn't allow the dirt in. But her eyes snagged on the last page of the stack, the one on top now. It was the call log. Her eyes scanned down the column of timestamps. I watched her lips move, silently reading the numbers. And then she froze. Her focus narrowed on 3 lines. 3:07 a.m., 3:18 a.m., 3:31 a.m. The blood drained from her face. I could physically see the connection being made, the tumblers of her denial clicking into their horrific new alignment. 3:07 a.m. The exact moment, every single night, that her husband's screams ripped through our home. It wasn't a random time. It was an anniversary, a nightly haunting. The fortress didn't just crumble. It was annihilated. Her whole body seemed to collapse inward. The perfect posture, the dignified mask, it all dissolved into nothing. She stared at the numbers on the page, and then her gaze drifted to the empty space beyond, as if she could suddenly see through the walls and into that other room, on that other night. The silence was absolute, broken only by Elena's ragged sobs. Finally, my aunt spoke. Her voice was a dry, rasping whisper, a sound I had never heard from her before. It was the sound of a life cracking apart. He let her die. I don't know how long we sat there after Elena left. She sort of stumbled out of the house in a daze, clutching the papers to her chest, whispering, "Thank you," and "Oh my God," over and over. The front door clicked shut, and the silence that fell wasn't the tense, unspoken silence we'd been living with for months. This was something else. This was the dead, heavy quiet of a tomb. The tea was cold. A forgotten slice of lemon floated sadly in Pilar's cup. The perfect living room, her sanctuary, looked like a blast zone. The printed out evidence was scattered across the polished wood of the coffee table like shrapnel. For what felt like an eternity, my aunt didn't move. She just sat there on her pristine sofa, her back ramrod straight, staring at the call log. She wasn't crying. I think that would have been easier to watch. Instead, she just looked erased. The vibrant, fiercely proud woman who ruled this house was gone, replaced by this hollow, gray shell. She looked like a statue of a queen whose kingdom had just been turned to ash around her, and she was the only thing left standing. And I was the one who had lit the match. All the righteous fury, the cold, clear sense of purpose I'd felt, it all curdled into a sick, heavy knot in my stomach. I looked at her, at the fine trembling in her hands, at the way her eyes were fixed on nothing, and I felt a wave of horror at what I had done. For her entire life, her one single defining rule was to keep the dirt out of her living room. It was her code, her religion. Don't speak of ugly things. Don't acknowledge unpleasantness, and your home will remain a place of peace and dignity. I didn't just bring the dirt in. I backed a dump truck into her sanctuary, hit the lever, and buried her alive in a mountain of filth, betrayal, and death. I had this fantasy, I guess, that the truth would be like a clean wound, that it would hurt, but it would be sanitizing, that she would be angry at Felix and grateful to me for showing her the light. What a stupid, arrogant child I was. The truth wasn't a clean wound. It was a flesh-eating virus, and I had just injected it directly into her heart. I gave a dead woman a voice. I exposed a coward for what he was. On paper, it sounds heroic, doesn't it? I did the right thing. But as I sat there watching the life drain out of the woman who raised me, it didn't feel right. It felt monstrous. I had forcibly stripped away the one thing she clung to for survival, her peace. It was a peace built on lies, sure, a fragile, pathetic illusion, but it was hers. It was the world she had painstakingly constructed for herself over decades, and did I have the right to detonate it? Did my pursuit of justice for a ghost I'd never met justify the complete and utter destruction of the living, breathing woman sitting right in front of me? I wanted to say something. Tia, I'm sorry. But the words felt like ashes in my mouth. Sorry for what? For telling the truth? Or sorry for the devastation it caused? I couldn't separate the two. They were the same thing. I had made a choice for her. I decided that the horrible truth was better than her comfortable lie. Who the hell gave me that right? AETA for thinking I knew what was best. I thought I was bringing justice, but looking at her broken form, I can't shake the feeling that all I really brought was pain. The next morning, the house was so quiet I could hear the dust settling. Pilar was already up when I came downstairs. She was sitting at the dining room table with a cup of coffee she hadn't touched and her mobile phone. She wasn't looking at it, just staring through it. I started to make my own coffee, my movements feeling loud and clumsy in the oppressive silence, when she finally moved. She picked up her phone, her fingers tapping the screen with a slow, deliberate precision. I heard her say one thing into the receiver, her voice flat and empty, like a recording. I need to speak to a divorce lawyer. That was it. No emotion, no explanation. Just a statement of fact. She was dismantling her life with the same methodical care she used to polish her silver. Felix left that afternoon. I was in my room when I heard the soft click of a suitcase latch. I looked out my window and saw him standing by his car. He had one small suitcase, nothing more. He looked up, and for a second our eyes met through the glass. His face was ashen, haunted. He didn't look angry or sad, just empty. Like the ghost that had been living inside him had finally hollowed him out completely and taken his place. I didn't feel a shred of pity. I just watched until his car turned the corner and disappeared. The space he left behind felt cleaner, but also vast and cold. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at my ceiling, watching the clock on my phone tick closer to 3:07 a.m. My whole body was tense, coiled like a spring, bracing for the scream that had become the soundtrack to my nightmares. My heart hammered against my ribs as the numbers changed. 3:05, 3:06. I held my breath. The clock turned to 3:07, and there was nothing. Just the gentle hum of the refrigerator from downstairs. 3:08 passed. 3:09. The scream never came. The haunting had finally left our duplex. I can only assume it packed its bags with Felix and follows him now, a screaming passenger in whatever car he drives, in whatever room he tries to sleep in. The silence should have been a relief, but it was just a different kind of loud. It was the sound of everything that had been broken. Elena, Sophia's sister, took the evidence to the police. They're reopening the inquiry into her sister's death. Justice, or some version of it, is grinding into motion. So, I did it. I gave the ghost a voice, and she was heard. But now I live in the wreckage. Pilar barely speaks to me. We move around each other like strangers in a library. The warmth is gone. Sometimes I see her looking at me and her expression isn't angry. It's worse. It's the look you'd give the doctor who just told you that you have a terminal illness. I'm the messenger who delivered the news that blew up her world, and she'll never be able to separate me from the message. I held a man accountable for a horrific act of cowardice, a crime that would have been buried forever. But I did it by violating my aunt's most sacred rule, by detonating a truth bomb in the center of the quiet life she fought so desperately to maintain. I chose for her. I decided she needed to know whether she wanted to or not. So Reddit, I have to ask. Ita for forcing my aunt to face a horrific truth she was desperate to avoid, even if it meant a dead woman finally got justice?